Welcome back to another episode of BHAW Radio. I am your host, Brian Rowan, with co-host Logan Everett. Welcome to the show, Logan.
Thank you.
And tonight's guest, we have Matt Marciniak. He's a West Point grad from 1995, team captain, two-time NCAA qualifier, EIWA champion. He ranks top 10 in the Army Wrestling wins list with 107 career victories. And currently the COO of Golf Business Network. Welcome to the show, sir. Appreciate you coming on.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for making the time. Appreciate it.
Yeah. This is a long time coming. I'm glad you were, a couple months ago we kind of contacted you a little bit, but it'd be nice to have you on here, some stories, kind of hear what you're up to. I know, I think you've listened to a few episodes in the past.
Yeah, enjoyed them. You guys are doing a fantastic job. You're up to 80, so you seem to keep finding a way to get content out there for wrestling, and keep up to date with the season when the season's on. And can't thank you enough for what you guys are doing to keep the message rolling.
Yeah, I can't believe that we're on 80 episodes already. This is
every time. How long is it? I don't know when did you guys start?
2 years ago,
2 years ago. Okay.
Right now. I think actually Memorial Day we released the 2 years ago we released the first episode.
Okay. You've been pretty prolific then. Yeah, that's great.
Wow. It's kind of hard to believe that it's been that long, but yeah. But for the listeners out there, I know you've missed, in the last, we haven't done an episode for the last month or so. So you haven't had us talking about CrossFit at all. We have 3 CrossFitters on the call right here. So as I was doing some research, checking, scouring your Facebook, I saw some CrossFit photos. So did you get your WOD in today?
Got my WOD in today. Yeah, we a little strength workout with cleans, and then we did 5 rounds with power cleans and push-ups and air squats, getting ready for Murph coming up on Monday.
Are you guys doing Murph on Monday or not Saturday, or how you guys?
We're doing it on Monday, keeping the Memorial Day connection.
Are you how are you going to scale it, or are you just going to do it straight up?
No, I do it all regular. I put on the vest and I do the pull-ups, push-ups, and still run. I don't know if I can really run that much. An old diver once told me, somebody's got to stand and fight. So that's the kind of about how I look at it. I don't run too fast.
You mentioned being an old diver. I'm sure we'll get into it more.
Yeah.
I thought Logan was the only, engineer diver that we've had in Army wrestling history. I think Keith thought that too. But it turns out, we did our research.
No, I think I beat you to it, Logan, long time ago. But that's all right. Good. It's good to see another wrestler stuck underwater.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was born in '95, so I'm interested to hear how.
I don't think it's changed much. Probably not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, they still try to drown you. Basically, that's the trick.
Yeah. We just ran the selection board a couple weeks ago. We actually selected another wrestler from the class of 20. So now he'll go to his phase 1, which is in Fort Leonard Wood. But
I do that in Fort Leonard Wood now. Okay, yeah, mine was in Fort Eustis.
In Leonard Wood in January, and then from there go to Panama City.
Okay, good. Yeah. You bring back lots of memories with that, boy. That's a lot of interesting, a lot of fun times.
Oh yeah.
So look, let's get this started. So talk to us about, you grew up in New York, your introduction into wrestling. You had an older brother that was, really into wrestling. Talk about, just growing up there, kind of your introduction to the sport, let's start from the beginning.
Well, it's my brother was my entry point into wrestling. More so than me, my brother, I would say, was that quintessential wrestler build, large, stocky legs, 5'6", 170, 180 pounds, football player and so on. And he didn't know what to do for a winter sport because he definitely wasn't going to be a basketball player. And apparently he tried out for swimming and was jumping on the diving board, and the wrestling coach saw him and said, "No, you need to join up for wrestling." And that, in a funny way, was a little bit my entry into wrestling, because in our school at the time, the wrestling room was the elementary school gym. And so my brother's 6 years older than me. He thought it would be a good idea if I, just, went to wrestling practice after school and then, get a ride home. So as a third and fourth grader, in elementary school, I head down to practice with the varsity wrestling team. There happened to be another kid that did it with me in elementary school. But eventually I stuck with it and continued to wrestle. And in New York, you have the opportunity to wrestle starting in your 7th grade, which I don't know is similar in all states. So I, really started my wrestling career very early with practice. I remember I'd go to one tournament a year at the end of the wrestling season, something down in East Jesus, Pennsylvania, and wrestle in some little open tournament, and then eventually got my chance to wrestle on the high school team when I got into 7th grade, and that led me to be able to win the most matches in New York State history at the time. When I finished, my whole wrestling career was interesting in the form of having that many matches, which was unique, starting in that 7th grade, and then being able to win a state championship at the end of that, and also win the state record number of wins, beating out a guy named JJ Stambro from was it Johnson City at the time. But that whole 6 years was an interesting time to wrestle and be in a small town and have a lot of support from family and friends. There was a lot of people that helped me during that 6 years. And when I think back at it now, you don't really realize it at the time how many people are helping you, especially in the sport of wrestling where it seems quite individual. I was extremely fortunate to have the coach that I had, a guy named Mike Watson, who just an amazing personality, who was the Pied Piper of all kids of all types, would have Saturday Rec, and somebody who put everything into developing young kids and into young men on the wrestling team. I was just very fortunate to be in that situation, because as I started my 7th grade year, he came in as the new coach. And so, I kind of became his, the kid that he was going to train for the next 6 years and turn it into something that he could be proud of. And, just have a good relationship with him. Unfortunately, he passed away many years ago, but a lot of good memories there as well.
Were you a 103 pounder as a 7th grader, or like how big were you?
Oh gosh, no, I was kind of chunky, I would say, heavy in the middle. So I started out like at 112. I think at the end of the season, because when the weights went up, I did get down to 105. So I was able to kind of like make it to the second level of sectionals. There's in New York at the time, there was a class sectional, because the schools were broken up into classes. So you would wrestle within your same school size. And then there would be a sectional tournament that if you qualified for the sectional, probably had to take like top 4 or something like that. And then you go to the sectional, that was all class, all schools, all sizes. And then you had to win that tournament to be able to go to the state tournament. And nobody in my school at the time had ever done that in the history of the school until my sophomore year, where I won first person ever win in the sectional tournament. And then had a chance to, I placed in states and, slowly progressed the rest of the way.
Brian, they used to have I think they probably still do, but they had a 96-pound weight class when I was.
It was 91 when I was there. It was a 91 pounder. Yeah. That was the lowest weight.
It makes sense if you're 7th and 8th graders. I mean,
yeah. There were kids that could do it, but then there were seniors that would try to cut down for whatever reason, right? Small guys that try to do that. And I think what we got now from a wrestling, my nephew wrestles at Sacred Heart. He's going to be a redshirted junior, but he's a senior in college, and just seeing the difference of how he gets to prepare versus kind of the things that I remember, I think it's just a heck of a lot better. That losing weight and the dehydration, that's I don't think that's a good way to go. You got to get good at your diet and be much more disciplined on that side, because ultimately I think it just generates better wrestling on actually on the mat. You see better competition.
Yeah, Matt, I wanted to
better performance, better matches, right? More exciting, right? Not gassers.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a big change. I think people are starting to look at the health side of it more. As I think back in the 90s, it was probably more of just if it sucks, oh well, just do it.
Yeah.
I think people are a lot more concerned with the health side of it. But I wanted to ask, so I'm from about 45 minutes south of Watkins, just across the Pennsylvania border, down 15.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with, the area for the most part. And I wanted to see if you had wrestled for any clubs in the area, or did you just wrestle with whatever the resources the high school had for you? Or because like for me, I was trying to go to Cornell to wrestle up there when I could. And it was either Cornell or Lock Haven. Both were about an hour and a half for me. So it was try to get in where you could. And that was really all we had. So I wondered what it was like.
It's going by memory. There were some maybe clubs down from south of me, Elmira area or whatnot, and I kind of got hooked in a little bit with that, just to do some of the kind of the USA opens. There would be like a regional, junior regional, and so on. I didn't do a lot of postseason wrestling. What I did do though was I would head down to the Granby School of Wrestling in Hampton, Sydney, Farmville, Virginia. And that was old man, we called him Old Man Martin, but he was a treat. He was the head coach of Granby down in Virginia Beach, and he would put on these camps, where the Granby came from. I mean, this is that whole Granby series and so on. And he was an interesting guy. So I got hooked in with them down there. So I would spend maybe 2 to 3 to even up to 6 weeks at wrestling camp in the summer. And, I would run across guys like, I'll never forget meeting Tom Ryan for the first time, where, it was just demonstrating. And I'm I don't know, sophomore or junior in high school or something like that. And I remember getting kind of in can't remember, top bottom position. And I just remember putting my head on his back as I'm setting up, and it felt like a rock. And I said, "Oh my gosh, this guy's just a killer." And but things like that. So my wrestling wasn't necessarily competitive. It was just a lot of training and drilling, because that's really what it was. I think there's a lot more opportunity now, a lot of different tournaments, a lot of things, and people just move around more. I mean, to travel 60 miles to go to a wrestling tournament, you'd think you were, my gosh, we cross county lines. That's you don't do that. But now, across state or whatever, there's just I guess the perception of doing that is not a big deal. Where back then it seemed a lot bigger deal.
Right.
So, kind of moving into like the later part of your high school, I noticed it's probably because you went to a small school, but there was a big jump, your freshman year, and then your sophomore, junior, and senior year, you were pretty much lights out other than, the state tournament, your
Right.
sophomore, junior year, you didn't have any losses in the season. Talk to us a little bit about like that environment and trying to like adjust, go into those postseason, like undefeated, and then like kind of overcoming that the next season to try to like, progress. Cause you got, you progressed, at least, from a performance standpoint each year.
Well, I think that's probably kind of a unique situation. I mean, it's just who I am as a person, setting goals and trying to achieve them was part of that. You mentioned kind of a big leap between, call it the 7th and 8th grade into the freshman year. And I can't really describe that anything other than a mental switch kicked off. I'll never forget, I was in a match, a guy from South Seneca, and shot in. He swiped me, lifted me up in a double leg, and pinned me. And I was just so angry at myself for getting pinned. And I just at that point in time, I literally slapped myself in the face at the end of the match because I was just so angry with myself. And I said, I'm not going to let that happen again. And that was, I kind of think of that moment as a way that I kind of switched over to really being a competitor. And the following tournament, I won it and started, really kind of winning from that point and on, simply because I felt that I just made the switch. I mean, I was intense and I was in shape or whatever, but to win at high levels, especially with the people I met later in my career, you recognize that they have a feeling of invincibility. And for a period of time, I would say I carried that with me for a short period of time of what it felt like to be, invincible on the mat. But that's truly, a mindset people, some people view that as maybe arrogant or confidence or, negative in a sense. But the people I've run across it, not only in wrestling and other sports, they just have a sense of invincibility and they will continue to be successful, I think, because they have that mindset to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I don't have the experience, unfortunately, of being a state champion.
me neither.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Well, hey, things happen to me. I mean, I think of my junior year, I lost to a guy in the semifinals who I had beaten probably 3 or 4 times across the years, and lost that match, and that was really super disappointing. And that because I was thinking that I was going to win that and move on, but that was probably one of my most punch in the gut losses that I ever had. Because just that expectation of I had that expectation of winning and didn't, and had to face the music that, hey, you know what, you're not as good as you think you are, and you gotta bear down again. And I remember with my coach driving back from Syracuse that year, and just saying, okay, let's start practice on Monday, we're gonna do it again, because we don't want this to happen again. And that was something that actually he wrote me a letter about it and said, that was not many people would have made that decision that quickly or whatever. A lot of kids, didn't do that. And, I was very intense in that point in my life, strange enough, and to be focused on one thing. Fortunately, there wasn't else a lot of focus on in Watkins Glen, New York as a young kid. There's not a lot going on. So I just happened to lock on to wrestling and choose that. And I had, like I said, I had good support around me, which was an element that was very important.
It's a pretty small world too, because in the doc you had wrote, and for the listeners out there, nobody before this episode has actually written like topics or answers into the doc. You're the first one to do it, so I appreciate.
Yeah, I had to do it because I'm like, you're jogging a lot of memories. I wanted to think through it a little bit. But
no, it's gonna make this like a much more prepared episode.
Yeah.
But
I thought all Army guys were prepared. Come on, what the heck's going on?
One of the things I noticed that's a small world is the guy you lost to in the state semifinals your junior year, Brian Gray. I coached with him in North Carolina for.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he's
say hello. I will. He's probably the reason I'm at West Point versus maybe some other school. So I have him to thank, maybe, to be at West Point.
Yeah, I wanted to wait till after the episode to reach out to him, but I I haven't talked to him, in probably like 6 months or so.
Yeah,
but,
that's great.
It's kind of
really cool.
I was like, I had to look it up too because I'm like, Brian Gray. I'm like, I know he's from New York. It's right around that time. And I was like, oh wait, this is the same one.
Yeah, well, that's why wrestling's a very small community, right? I mean, there's not many out there in a way.
we can segue that, I guess, into West Point. I'm curious to see how you found out about West Point. I mean, and I know it is a New York school. Did you have anybody that you knew that went there, or were your parents interested in it? How did you?
Well, I would say I come from a heavy military family in a way. I had a grandfather serve in World War II. My father was, a Vietnam vet, flight surgeon, kind of older when he was over there, but he served in the military. My brother served in the military, kind of got there, not directly, he went to Brockport and wrestled there. And after Brockport, he joined the military because he wanted to fly aircraft, and they did that. My sister was a ROTC. So in a way, in my family, it was, either basically going to kind of the state school, or if you have an opportunity through the military, you can, do something more. And, I actually remember, having that, lovely conversations that a young man has with his father at times. I ain't going to West Point, and, my father saying, hey, you need to apply, and, have those conversations. But ultimately, I did apply, and, I would say, because I found out early that I was accepted, I'm like, well, wait a minute, I'm gonna wrestle, because that was important to me at that time in my life. And, I'm going to get a free education. I think that's a pretty good thing. And I had done a visit. I met with, Jack Effner and Nick Malden. And I think I roomed with Jeff Thompson at the time. So, I felt somewhat comfortable. And what was it? My brother, he went to the Coast Guard Academy. He didn't complete the Coast Guard Academy, so he did 1 year there. So there was maybe a little bit of understanding of what academy life might be like. And so I just said, hey, you know what? The path is clear for me. I'm going to go do this. And, it really wasn't necessarily out of kind of a patriotic desire, which, a lot of guys who go to West Point and women too, kind of have that. That was not my reason for going. Albeit I will have to say it was, it becomes your reason for staying. And getting through that. It's, for me, it was a transition. It was, I remember my roommate saying, man, I wanted to do this since I was a Boy Scout in 3rd grade. And I said, I didn't even know about West Point until probably I was a, junior high school, so let alone what it really meant. So, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity and to have call it sufficient grades. I wasn't necessarily the best student, but sufficient enough to have good enough grades to get through that that filter or hurdle, and also be at least recognized as a wrestler, and the coach Effner at the time willing to bring me in on the team, at least call it as a recruit. Albeit when I got there, I realized I wasn't the only recruit at the weight. He hedged his bets. He put a couple people at the same weight, and we had to battle it out in the future.
Yeah. So you get to West Point, and I'm looking at your career stats, which is also very extensive.
A lot better than mine.
Yeah, I didn't have to go digging. Sorry, Logan, what'd you say?
So they're a lot better than mine.
Yeah. But I noticed, like, you very similarly at in high school, like you progressively got better. There was a big jump, after your first 2 years, not in high school, but wrestling in high school.
Yeah.
And then you had a big jump at West Point. You mentioned, in high school you had that little, that mindset shift. Was there any kind of shift at West Point that, kind of made you jump levels, or, explain that kind of process?
Well, I think, the thing that comes to mind for me was really that, we have so-called that preseason. And when I got into the room and I, thinking that you're pretty tough and going to make things happen, I quickly had the grad assistant coach at the time was Nick Malden, and he kind of pulled me aside and pounded on me pretty good to start with. But, it was also an awakening of, meeting some of the other wrestlers at your weight, and, seeing other recruits. One of the recruits was Romeo Daniel. And, he was much, much more talented and experienced than I was, albeit, right, he's coming out of Pennsylvania. And I don't believe he won a state championship at that point in time. So, how do you rank yourself up against one another when it's just on paper and you haven't really gone head to head? And I'll remember coming into the black and gold meet and, not coming out on top. And that was, a little bit tough to take, so to speak. I guess in my mind, I can rationalize it a little bit. I'm a plebe freshman, you maybe not want to expect to be the front guy in the beginning, but, I'd always been the front guy at whatever weight I wanted to be at. So that kind of put a little fire under my butt to try to, change that in the near future. And so I just call it got a little tougher. I took my lumps with, the tougher guys, and I just tried to make myself better in that regard. And I just got smarter as well as a wrestler. Mm, my strategy most of the time in high school was just to be in better shape than the other guy. And, I didn't have, I would say, the most best technique, never really did. But, tried to leverage a couple strengths there. And, coming into college, I couldn't necessarily train as much as I wanted relative to time because of the demands that West Point and school really put on you. So you had to become, in my mind, a smarter wrestler and be able to use the mat to your benefit and the rules to your benefit. So I spent a little bit, I think, more thought or time around how do I win matches, on the edges. You take a guy out of bounds, right, or near the edge of the mat, and it's not a scramble situation. You keep your points. Hey, I'm going to have these tight matches. I need to hold a guy down. There's riding time now. That was a new element to factor into my wrestling and so on. So how do you do that? And coming out of that first semester and going into the kind of the competitive part of the season, there's always wrestle offs. Effner, in my time there, at least my memory was, we always had wrestle offs a lot. And you were either wrestling off for a spot or wrestling to keep your spot. And I had an opportunity to wrestle off again, and for the 158 slot, and then I won it, I think, in that January timeframe, and started then getting the real matches where you get even better experience along the way. And that ultimately for me was just I hadn't really reached my potential, and so every match I wrestled against good competition allowed me to get better and better and better. And my style was one, fortunately, over my career, I was not very injury prone because I was a very probably conservative wrestler, conservative in the positions and so on. And it just allowed me to, wrestle a heck of a lot of matches over the years. I kind of compared the number of matches I wrestled at the time compared to a lot of other people. And I just had a lot of time on the mat. And I think my style allowed me to do that. A lot of guys have styles that, they're not going to last that long because of their audacity and how they just give it all at all times. I was not necessarily giving it my all from an intensity standpoint, but more trying to think things through and then choose my points of attack, being much more conscious about my wrestling versus just, guy being in shape and being able to take somebody down who's not in shape.
You had a pretty good record. I'm looking at it now. It says you had 73% win percentage, which is pretty good. I think it's a lot better than most people. And I noticed, some of your results got better your cow in first year. Do you think that some of that mat time contributed to that, like later in your career, or was there something else you think that stood out to you that could have caused that?
Well, I think going back to that confidence factor again, kind of the more there was just as you get so-called the next year up, you kind of look down on the guys coming in, so to speak. So you get a little bit of a kind of a pecking order mindset, right? You're not going to let necessarily some newbie coming in to show you what's going on. You want to thump them a little bit, I guess, is kind of part of that is that attitude. You got to have that attitude. So I think that was a factor for me.
Was
But
it
again,
like that in West Point, or was it like that in high school too, or just like what the West Point kind of class system?
I think that more so West Point. I don't really remember that so much in high school per se. It was just in high school it was more, I got to do better than last year. How do I just work out harder? I'll jump more rope or I'll run more, whatever. That kind of thing where, West Point was just so busy for me, and you guys know, I mean, you're doing 18, hour days all time, and you're trying to fit in training, in that. And you just got to be a lot more efficient with the time that you got available. It's just not something that you can waste. And I felt that I tried to do that. I wish probably now looking back that there was somebody that I could have been, a mentor to me that it could have helped me been a lot better at that. But, you got to deal with what you work with and do the best you can.
Outside of, before we go into the next topic, outside of wrestling, how was your transition to West Point? You mentioned your brother spent a year at the Coast Guard. like when you,
Yeah, I had some challenges. I'm a staff ranger. I failed an academic class in my first semester, and then realizing that I'm gonna have to go through second semester and have one day off and then go head to staff and then head to Buckner. That was you would say probably a little bold when you see all your buddies leave for home for 6 weeks or whatever, and you got to do staff or whatever. But ultimately, one of my best buddies, I actually just got off the phone with him today, Colonel Altenberg. He's over in Korea now, but anyway, we met in staff, and he's been one of my best buddies for years. And you never know what things kind of throw at you. So when something you think is bad is happening to you, probably it's good for you. It's what you make of it. So deal with it and move on. So for me, there was an academic transition of learning how to just study. It was not something I was very proficient at. It's not something necessarily I had to do. High school wasn't necessarily tough in that regard, but now your WPRs and projects and so on. And I always used to tell people, hey, the easiest week of the year is finals week. That's the easy week. All we got to do is sleep and take a test. That's pretty dang easy. Everything else is a lot harder. So, and that's the way really that I thought about it. So yeah, the education piece I had to get up to speed on, and, eventually improved on that too. I started out failing a course, and by the time I graduate, I'll do a shout out to my niece. She did this fast. She became a wreath man in her first semester. It took me till I graduated to become a wreath man. So I had to dig myself out of a hole throughout the way. And then, my niece is showing me up in the first semester. So she's pretty dang smart.
Yeah, I should say I never
impressive as a plane.
I never earned it.
Yeah. So yeah.
I think part of that's just figuring out, I started as a freshman, I was fortunate to be able to do that. And I think it took me a long time to figure out the balance of what needs to get done and what doesn't need to get done.
Yeah.
At least
you always follow that old cadet cliche. If you wait till the last minute, it only takes a minute. So,
the problem was with me, if I wait till the last minute, I got a 0.
Well, that's true. I mean, you get what you put into it. That's the other. Yeah. Got to balance that against that one too.
Yeah, so you did qualify for NCAAs.
Yeah.
As a cow, finished the tournament 1 and 2. Do you think what were your thoughts after that tournament? What was your
I was excited to be at the NCAAs. By then I knew the deal and what it all meant, and that was an accomplishment there. It was always a goal to become an All-American. That was not something I was able to achieve while at West Point. I felt I had a good chance coming into my senior year with that experience behind me, that I could do something coming in there. And I would just say, my senior year, I lost my first match, and just wasn't my best performance for sure. And the other guy had a good performance, and unfortunately his next performance wasn't good enough to allow me to do any wrestleback. So I was out. I was definitely disappointed that I didn't necessarily perform in the NCAAs the way that I wish I had. But I do look back on everything and realize winning the EIWAs wasn't an accomplishment, especially for a guy from West Point. My story there was when we did the EIWAs when I was a senior. It was held at Navy, and I'll never forget being at Navy and in the finals, how guys get announced and so on. So I was wrestling against a guy from Brown, T. Von Abel. And they introduced T. Von Abel. He's from Brown, dance major, and then the Navy crowd's kind of like, dance major, what's this? And then they introduced me, Army, engineer major, this, that, and the other thing. And that's the first time that I had, I think, all of the Navy crowd rooting for an Army guy in that particular match. And actually T-Von, he had beaten me earlier in the year pretty soundly. I think it was like a major decision. So for me to come back in that match and win that one in that environment was definitely a highlight of my wrestling career and something that I look fondly back on.
That's wild. I couldn't imagine if the roles were reversed that we'd be rooting for the Navy guy in that situation.
Yeah. So, well, maybe it was foreshadowing that, the Navy decided to drown me for a while. You never know. They'll get their pound of flesh, apparently.
They get their time back.
Yeah, they'll get it.
So, you were a captain as a firstie as well, so, I put in the dot, Coach Ward announces captains, at certain times, and over the years it's been different. Were you a co-captain or were you a captain?
Yeah, I was co-captain with Sammy Volkman.
Oh,
so Sammy, he was 118 pounder, 126 or 134. I can't remember the weight there exactly. Poor Sammy had to suck a lot of weight, but yeah, we were co-captains together, he and I.
When your role as a captain, I mean, were you like the disciplinarian on the team as well? Like, what was the back then? Like,
I was,
like, hey, this guy was late to class. You need to get on your buddies.
Yeah, there was a little bit of being a disciplinarian, and I'm probably not definitely at the time, I'm not your friendly disciplinarian. I'm pretty stringent, I guess at the time, with whatever was going on. And but most guys, honestly, all good. We had a couple maybe long haircuts, and somebody pointed out to me, you had long hair, and I said, well, yeah, I had long hair, but when somebody told me to get a cut, I got a cut. So there's rebellion, and then there's rebellion. But for the most part, everybody was I would say really good. We didn't have any major issues on the team at all. Some interesting stories. You'll have to have Bill Solinger on and tell him about his Navy story, about how he ran up into the stands and after his match. But anyway, I'll leave that for him to tell that story. When
you guys tied Navy your first year, right? If I remember correctly.
Was it first year? Yeah, I think it was. Yeah. And gosh, that was so close. I kind of put myself on as the reason why we tied it. I was in a match and doing a good job, taking them down and scoring points. And I remember, didn't know who the guy was, and I can't remember the guy's name to this date. But I got this picture. There's a picture of me taking him down, and all the cadets screaming behind him. But that was a match I probably should have majored, maybe even potential a technical fall. But I chose bottom, and he was an excellent rider, and he just rode the heck out of me for about almost 2 minutes. And finally, by the time I escaped, I was gassed, and I couldn't really put on, the accelerator, so to speak, to get more points. I won the match. But I kind of looked back at that as a missed opportunity for us to win that, because I didn't get a major decision in that particular match.
So there was no criteria at the time. You just tie.
Just tie. It's like kissing your sister. Yeah. I mean, I guess somebody could call that a moral victory. It wasn't a loss, but it's not, of course, not what you want. And we thought we had it. I remember the match before me, the guy, Greg, can't remember, but he was a 50-pounder, and, he was up with like 4 points and 30 seconds to go, and the Navy guy clawed it back. And that was a rough loss there. I'm sure he feels, you wish you would have taken that match back too. But like I said, I had the opportunity to get that one extra point as well. So, it takes a team effort, to win those matches.
So did you, I know you were an engineer, but did they branch you engineer based off you being an engineer major, or was that a choice that you got to make? Because I know now they're transitioning more to be focused on, relative to your major, it sounds like. But when I was there, that wasn't necessarily the way it was. You could branch whatever you were higher enough on.
Yeah, it was a merit base. You could choose medical service corps if you're the first person. But that was not around by the time I got there. So I chose engineers. Just had an affinity towards engineering. By the time then I realized I got some skills here, doing civil and math and fluid dynamics and all that stuff. So I enjoyed that particular coursework. And then, hey, you know what? I'll go be an engineer. I didn't know what it meant to be an Army engineer at all, let alone what were all the plethora of opportunities that could come your way as an engineer. I just, in my mind said, well, engineering, that'll work, and chose that. And then from there, I think I chose going to Fort Hood, Texas. Is supposed to be my first duty station.
So after you graduated, you stayed on and you were a grad assistant at West Point. Did you choose that, or how was that selected?
Yeah, I did. Well, it's kind of like the coach at the time. I don't know how they decide who gets it, but they at the time it was probably a couple people got invites to do it. But I was of course a captain there, so I think I had maybe some preferential treatment to be able to do that. So I chose graduate assistant coach. Not realizing where that would lead me on my career path, because it did, it gets you off cycle with all of your other classmates, so to speak, coming out of West Point into all the other, officer basic courses. That was not a conscious decision, but looking back on it, you realize, that was an interesting thing that happened to you with that small decision. And I like being around the wrestling team and trying to help out. I was thinking it was time for me to give back a little bit and be able to do that. So, that was really the basis of the decision for me. I don't know why necessarily I was the one chosen, other than, it's good having a mid-weight guy in the room to, pound on the guys coming in like Nick Malden did to me, So, that was basically how I thought of it.
You sure it didn't have anything to do with you being an EIWA champ?
It might have had a little bit to do with it, but sometimes you don't know the full story. So,
starting off, you went to the basic course and then went straight to your first assignment. What was your first assignment?
Yeah, so I was, so I'm an officer. I'm in, again going to, engineer basic at Fort Leonard Wood. And I'm basically getting ready to go to Ranger School. That's really, to me, that was the focus, because getting ready to go to Ranger School, got to get in shape for that. That's going to be a tough school to get through. So the coursework or whatever was, I hate to say it, almost secondary relative to wanting to prepare and making sure you're fit and ready to go to that school. And then one day a guy comes in saying, hey, anybody want to be an Army diver? Come see me in my office. And you look at this guy and like, well, who is this guy? I mean, he's a captain. He's got this funny thing on his uniform. I'm like, I've never seen anything like that before. What is this? So, I'm familiar with the water. I managed the girls swim team in high school. So what the heck? Let's go talk to this guy. Maybe I can, do something. So I'll go to his office. A couple of us show up there. And he says, okay, guys, interested in being an Army diver, meet me at the running trail at literally dark 30. And I think it was like 3 a.m. or something, he said. And okay, so we'll go, we'll meet him at 3 a.m. I show up, nobody else shows up. The company commander, I learned about this later, but he was the prior company commander of the dive unit. He says, oh, good, you're here. Start running. I'll give you a 3-minute head start. And if I catch you, I'm not going to allow you to apply. So I took off running, in the middle of the night down the wooden trail there. For those that, went out to Fort Leonard Wood, they got some 5K track in the back there. So ran that in the middle of the night and finished the run. He comes in behind me. He says, okay, well, good. I'm just making sure that you're worth my time. And now we're going to go train every day to get ready to be a diver. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I would just, want to go sign up. So he kind of took me under his wing and, put me in the pool and started building up my breath hold, because he was basically preparing me to drown, or at least not drown, by being able to hold my breath for a long time, and spent 4 weeks with me in the pool and, making sure I could be ready to go to even the pre-screening course at Eustis, and then finally down to the NDSTC, the Naval and Diving and Salvage Training School in Panama City. So that was my introduction to the dive unit. Is this little bit every step along the way, there's always some sort of initiation ritual that you go to, and that was my first one of those.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear, because for listeners that don't know, I'm also engineer dive, but the process for me was a little different. It starts the same way, right? Some captain comes to your classroom and he says, "Hey, whoever wants to be an engineer diver, you show up this time, this place, bring a packet with you that has all this whatever in it, your letter of why you want to be a diver, all this stuff." Then we started with diver physical fitness test, and then it was about 4 hours in the pool of just drowning you for 4 hours, and then see who survives. And if you made it through, I think we started with about 25 people, and then my class ended up, I think we finished with 6 or 8 that got interviews, and then we selected 4 to 5 from that group. And then once we were through that, it was next thing was phase 1, and phase 1 was at Fort Leonard Wood, and then you go straight from Fort Leonard Wood to NDSTC. So
Yeah.
kind of interesting. I'm sure being at NDSTC or in Panama City as a second lieutenant for me was fantastic. I think it was, we lived 5 minutes from the beach, and we were there for 8 months. And
yeah, I have fond memories of that as well.
Yeah.
I remember the difference. I think my pre-screening course was at Fort Eustis and given by the NCOs there.
Okay.
So the NCOs, they already started having fun with me. I mean, there's nothing better than an NCO trying to drown an officer. So they had a lot of fun when we were there in the 10-day pre-screen, and then got through that. And then head down to the naval station there. And similar to you, yeah, I got to live like one row back from the beach. Yeah. And basically during the week it was train hard to get up early in the morning and get through the scuba portion. That's always fun. And then you go into the salvage portion, which is, at least by then you got some respect, let's call it that. No rank, I'm still captain. Hey, Army! I mean, that was, I never had my lieutenant rank on a Navy base. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But anyway, we had fun. I used to say we used to solve a case every weekend on Saturday on the beach. Absolutely. And that was one of our fun things we got to do. But then, it was always back to, I don't know. I mean, we used to get dropped off, off wherever and have to swim in and things like that. I remember those. But weird things like, hey, we take the boat out and we go dive out in the Gulf, and I'm down there and there's dolphins swimming around me, while I'm wearing a hard hat underwater and they're checking me out. So, a lot of interesting things happen in the dive world.
So did you go straight to Fort Eustis to be on a dive team after NDSTC?
Yeah. Went right in there, right in, took over for the 511th.
Okay, because I'm interested to hear at just different times, I guess, like what kind of work were you guys doing when you were there? Was it? Yeah,
so my time in the Army, in the dive unit, there was no training dollars really to do anything. So, this is during the Clinton administration. So how we were able to train is the unit would bid on contracts, whether that be Corps of Engineer contracts or civilian contracts. And of course, we could basically win any bid because we didn't have to pay for the labor for it. So the XO's job at the time was really just, I think there's 3 dive detachments at Eustis and one out in Hawaii, was basically sourcing gigs, sourcing jobs, being a bidding contractor to whatever training might need to be done. And so that was really how we got things to do. We would do dam inspections. One of my deployments was down to Puerto Rico and do kind of call it a peer rehabilitation because hurricanes come through and, stuff's in the water and everybody's swimming in the water, you clean it up and things like that. I did a tour down in Panama doing some cleanup in the Panama area, and then, go to jungle school. And then I had the opportunity to train with the Canadian divers and then do some cold water diving on both coasts, East and West Coast, and have a little fun with the Canadians. So, it's a relatively short period of time to do, you get about a year, 18 months, to be a, platoon leader, detachment leader there. And then you're off to do something else pretty fast.
So the structure, I think, now is different than it probably was when you were there. I don't know if you probably had like a main battalion or you had
Yeah, we were attached to a transpo battalion, and we would do ship hull inspections, right? Get under the ships and take it, make sure things, anchors weren't fouled up in the props and stuff like that. Those were, to keep the boats flowing.
So as a lieutenant, were you a detachment commander?
I was not detachment commander. There was a detachment commander, but they had the 511th, the 564th, and something else. So there was a commander there, a captain, who that the company then was augmenting some sort of transportation battalion.
Okay. Yeah. So that, I mean, now there's 4 dive detachments now in Fort Eustis, and each detachment has a commander and an XO, and outside the officers that are there. But it's always interesting just to hear, times change and the priorities of the Army shifts. So
No, sure. Yeah.
we're doing all kinds of different stuff now. And now the big thing right now is supporting wet gap crossings and all that stuff. I think it's probably more to.
Everybody asks me, why does the Army need divers? And I said, well, the Army and the Navy don't go up rivers, so that's the basics of it. Whether that's really true or not is not necessarily important, but there's always work to be done, in the water.
So we'll transition away. We're probably boring Brian with all the dive talk.
Yeah.
We're
talking about the Army,
Our fans do not care about the specifics of Army diving. No, I'm teasing. No, this is interesting. And honestly, we have a lot of, some like cadets listen in, and like, these are different opportunities that, people listen.
It's a unique field.
May not know that are out there.
And some things, there's a lot of timing to it, but if you want to become an Army diver, work on your breath hold, get it to 4 to 5 minutes, and then we'll consider you.
It's a question every lieutenant colonel or colonel that I come in contact with in a professional setting, or like any LPDs that we do. I always try to find a way to word a question that's always, what do you know about Army divers? And it's not an insult type of question. It's like, I genuinely want to know what you know. So as a commander, I can figure out what does this person know about how to utilize what they don't know anything. That helps me. Like, if you tell me, hey, I don't know anything about divers or what they do, that helps me be able to shape my argument to why you need us, right? But we can transition from this, because I'm sorry, Brian, but
you can edit some of that out, right? You can just get.
Well, I think, I mean, as interesting as that is, I thought it was really interesting that you got back into wrestling after this. And so I look at your military career, it's like, the first half of it, you're doing cool Army stuff, and the last half, you're training and you're
wrestling, right?
Yeah. So I'm really interested to know how, you got back into competing, after, especially it sounded like you didn't compete as a grad assistant.
No, that was pure, just practice and so on. So how I got back into wrestling was, I finished up my time basically as, lieutenant in charge of the platoon. They call it detachment, but it's basically the size of a platoon. And they were saying, hey, we want you to be, go be the company commander of the overall dive detachment. I'm like, okay, great. Well, I need to get to the advanced course first before I can take that command. So I call up personnel and I say, hey, I need to get back to Fort Leonard Wood and get enrolled in the advanced course. And they said, well, you can't even get in that course for another 2 years. I'm like, well, what the heck am I going to do for 2 years? I'm in Fort Eustis in a transportation battalion, and I'm an engineer. so, you know, in my mind, I'm like, well, I got to figure out something. And my mind shifted back. I had known of the WCAP program. I knew Army had wrestlers in it. It was not something that was really ever on my mind, but I'm like, okay, I know in the Army, I'm going to have to go, you know, get a master's degree. Maybe I can go be an Army wrestler and get a master's degree at the same time. And that was my simple plan. So I call up the Army wrestling coach at the time, and I forget his name. It was an enlisted guy, and then there was a Russian guy, Anatoly, who was really call it the real head coach. But they have to have an Army person kind of in charge of the unit as well, relative to the wrestlers. And I call a guy up and I said, hey, I'm Lieutenant Marciniak, I used to wrestle at West Point and would like to, try to get on the WCAP program. How do I do that? And the guy didn't know me very well. He's, more of a, at the world level kind of wrestling, but he called around and said, well, you know what, sir, I'll give you an interview. Well, okay, what do you mean by interview? Well, what that meant was I had to go kind of take some leave, travel out to Fort Carson and wrestle off for the spot. And that was my interview. So I go out there kind of on the weekend, over a weekend, fly out. I hadn't wrestled in who knows how long, let alone, wrestled freestyle. That was never something really in my repertoire. And I go out there and, I would say a little overweight for sure. So I think that gave me some advantage. And wrestled off kind of for the 76 kilo position and won that match enough such that they gave me orders to come out and be part of WCAP. And that started a nice kind of 18-month time frame of training at the Olympic Training Center at Fort Carson and training with the what's the team called there at Olympic Training Center? But it's the Olympic Training Center, athletes who were on the freestyle or working to be, the eventual Olympians in the U.S. So I forget the name of what the program's called at the time, but there's just a set of guys that get invited out to the Olympic Training Center, and that's where they train. And so I spent the next, 2 years getting thumped on by, guys like Dan St. John and Brandon Slay and Mike Van Arsdale. He's like UFC champion 13 or something. And Brandon Slay, he's a gold medalist and coach at Penn. So, yeah, I just got thumped on for 2 years and got better doing that. Never really kind of saw the light of day on the Olympic ladder. But was the number one guy in the Army. I won Army, the Armed Forces Championship, that kind of thing, and wrestled in nationals out there. Kind of made my way pretty far, but not to the top 8 or top 5 that you got to be to go to the mini tournament and things like that. But I was also going to school. I did do a master's degree in aerospace engineering at the same time. So I was, call it hedging my bets. Wrestling was just a means to kind of get me that education. But the time there spent and what I learned as a wrestler at that level was eye-opening. And to see the world's best and to have the chance to interact with them. And as I tell people, I said, those guys at the world level, they didn't want to wrestle each other. A Les Gutchess did not want to wrestle a Brandon Slay. These are 2 top guys in the world, but they wanted to wrestle me because I couldn't hurt them and I could give them a good look and a good sweat. So, strange enough, I was the person a lot of guys wanted to have as a partner because simply, they wouldn't have to go against, the real competition, call it that. And I would be the guy that would, make sure they get a great workout for the day. So, like I said, I spent nearly 2 years with Brandon Slay and him gut wrenching me, and that famous freight train double leg takedown was honed in on, I was the dummy for that for many years, but I'm very proud of that part of my wrestling career to have, taken not necessarily front stage, but backstage and help somebody reach their goals. And that's really what I take away from that. That's one of my Really one of my best accolades of being a wrestler is helping somebody, achieve greatness.
So when did your wife come into the picture? I mean, you got married, towards the end of your Army career. Was she
Yeah.
in Colorado, or did you guys meet there, or like how did that kind of evolve?
Yeah, so my wife, I didn't meet my wife while I was a cadet, albeit she was running around West Point at the time. Her father was the German liaison officer from the German Bundeswehr, the German army. And so he moved over with his family, and he had, call it, two, senior twin girls in high school. And, they soon learned that they should not run around West Point while classes were changing, because they would get, call it, oogled quite a bit. Makes sense, right? But I had actually met her twin sister while I was a cadet at West Point, through kind of one of my classmates was dating her. And later on, those two people got married, and I met my wife at their wedding back at West Point. I met her, and it wasn't, call it, something that was intended or whatever. But, that was the first time I met her. And then I had, as a lieutenant, right, you're trying to save money, trying to save that TDY money as you travel around the country. So as I was traveling from Fort Eustis out to Fort Carson, I had the chance to stay with my future sister-in-law at their place, trying to save a little money. And my future wife was there. And that's really when we struck up a relationship and kept that going while, I was out there in Fort Carson. She was a flight attendant for a German airline. So she would get trips to the US, and we'd get a weekend or two with one another. And then finally we decided, well, either we make a go of this or we stop it. So we made a go of it. And that was about the time that I finished my wrestling career and was getting set to maybe go to Korea unaccompanied. And I just got married. So, really just made the decision to leave the Army at that point in time, because I wanted to be with my newlywed. That was that. And then that put me on a career to be, a civilian, and go figure out how to be a civilian from being in the military.
A lot of people are in that same boat who are listening.
Yeah, that's a hard transition. It really is. At my stage when I was doing that as a captain, I got a job with Alcoa, and freak nature, a guy that I had gone to OBC with saw my resume come out of the fax machine and kind of put it on the top of the list of the company that I got an interview on. I mean, this is strange how life does these things to you. Got the interview, got a job, moved to South Carolina working for Alcoa, and really tried to transition to be in the civilian world. And my skill set that I transferred from being in the Army, or at least, kind of the West Point mindset, is just organization. Being able to organize things that are disorganized. A lot of companies, they would think they're organized, and people complain maybe about why the military's slow and so on, but it is organized. And taking those organizational skills and applying that in the civilian world is where I was able to rapidly add a lot of value quickly.
So what was your first job coming out of the military, and how did where you are now?
So the first job was, call it, technical sales, kind of what they call an application engineer, because I was an engineer, right? I can understand, I'm not an engineer in the form of design. I'm not going to design the next widget or whatever. That was not my skill set, but I can understand engineering on many different levels, and I can communicate that from kind of engineering terms into more lay terms. And so that's where it started relative to me to doing technical sales. And I was working in the transmission and utility industry. So, as you go outside and you see big transmission towers and the cables and lines around that was the industry that I was in. And I rapidly moved from technical sales into product management. Product management, what does that mean? It means you're in charge of a set of part numbers, basically, and put them on a growth trajectory, trying to sell more into the market than your competition. And to a certain degree, I really enjoyed that kind of work, simply because it was a competition, but a competition of the mind. It's much more of a chess game at that point in time. Can you better design, position, market, and sell a product than your competition? And that's just, in a way, it's a nice, as I call it, it's a game. And can you think your way through that? And there's no different than there's strategies in the Army relative to how to deploy your units to take over an objective. The same thing holds true tied to the civilian world, right? How do you take your resources and deploy them in such a way that you can achieve your objectives against a competitive force, right? Your competition is out there and you're doing that. And so that was really the mindset. I always laughed because I brought a lot of the military strategy and technical jargon into the commercial world, because a frontal attack is akin to just lowering your price to try to see if you can sell more. There's things like that, using these analogies that people do. Or do we want to do an ambush, right? And then I would say, well, an ambush like in the civilian market would be doing something like this in this scenario. And I was able to get people to understand that kind of approach and recognize, oh, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. We shouldn't do the frontal attack. That's going to cause us to lose a lot of profit. We need to do a roundabout, right? Develop a new product that comes in on this way. And so I did a lot of that for a lot of years and had a lot of success with that, to where I became head of strategy and product management and business development for a multinational corporation, TE Connectivity, and had the opportunity to live, in Germany, to live in China with my family, and, just experience the world coming out of, the military, and spending, really kind of 15, nearly 20 years as an international businessman, global manufacturing.
International man of mystery, some may say.
Some people think yes, but it's not too mysterious. Just go over to places like China and you'll learn about it. It's not that mystery. It's just a hurdle to get over.
When I was looking at your LinkedIn initially, like I saw like all this travel, and I was like, man, that's got to be like crazy on the family and your wife. And then like now hearing like your wife's background, it kind of all fits together.
Yeah, I mean, that's, for me, I'm very fortunate. My wife is very willing to, do that, being from Germany and all that, seeing a lot of different cultures, being, coming over to a new country, at a young age, and not being able to speak the language and learn that, right? So very open to be able to do that. I could not have done any of those things, without her support and really help. Because there is a lot of travel. I mean, imagine your daily commute, or call it my daily commute at times was, traveling literally around the world in a week. Going from, north, here in Virginia, flying to Shanghai for a week, and then flying to Europe for another week, and then flying back to the East Coast. So I will validate the world is round. It's not flat. And you do that, and there's people that do it, and I was one of them for a period of time, and it's a heck of an experience for sure. It takes a lot out of you to put the energy and do that. At least it did for me, and I eventually called it quits. I had enough. Just like my wrestling career, at one point I said, you know what, practice is more fun than competing. I think I'm done. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of interesting people and be all over the world and have a tremendous amount of network now. I've wanted to shift my efforts and energy more into my entrepreneurial spirit, where, now I'm in charge of a company called Golf Business Network. I, started that out simply as a potential future hobby, because I knew eventually when I retire, I want to play golf on nice golf courses. So I decided, after I, completed business school at Duke, that I would just create a company. I was an engineer. I figured, I need to do engineering. So I built a car. When I completed business school, I guess I better learn how to run a business. So I created a business. And so that business, a partner and I created that now, over almost 20 years ago. And no, 15 years ago, and it's morphed into now a business that I do full time, being, engaged with the PGA Professionals of America and helping them run their business better. So I'm able to apply the skills that I learned from the military around organization that then deployed into, the civilian world. And now I've taken those same skill sets and, applying it now to help other people run their businesses.
I feel like golf is growing a lot in like the more mainstream, like younger communities. Like, are you involved in like the marketing aspects of those things and like, or
not directly, but when you see things like Top Golf and those facilities pop up, right? They're making golf more accessible to more people. Back when Tiger started, right, there was the Tiger effect, but then recently in the last 2 years, there's been the COVID effect. Simply golf has gone gangbusters due to COVID, because where else are people going to do? I mean, being locked in your house is not I think a brilliant solution. So, people found ways to still be with one another and be distant, and golf happened to be a great way to be able to do that. And so golf as an industry has enjoyed a bump on the market. The challenge is with the golf industry is, can they keep it? And let alone, the people that service the market, are they willing to support it? So, honestly, there's a huge opportunity for people transitioning from the military to get into the golf industry, because there's a huge need for PGA professionals and just people who are willing to be in that service industry. Because where golf is at, it's not so much playing golf, it's a service industry, it's hospitality, it's helping people be better golfers and enjoy their leisure time. So you need people to do that work, and the golf industry is tight on labor like many others, but it's an industry that's it's had its challenges for quite a few years now.
Do you guys offer discounts to nice courses?
Well, you never know. I think we can always work something out. Our network represents, I'll say within network, I have over 700 clubs of the top private country and golf clubs, and in the United States. That's what our business caters to, because these, the clubs like we just held the PGA right out there at Southern Hills. That's clubs that are types of clubs that are in our network. Strange enough, the superintendent out there, he and I used to play golf at my local town in Watkins Glen, so I have a relationship with the guy who created maintains that course out there. But there's all sorts of opportunities to get golf and through my business, and one of the things I am trying to do is create a channel for charities to gain access to the market. And that's some of the things that I'm working on, is we're looking at various military, charities, the Folds of Honor types of things, and others of that nature, such that, there's a lot of people that want to give back, and they need to find reputable charities to give back to. And that's something that, as I, kind of recently transitioned into this role in the last 2 years, as I look forward into kind of my 50s and 60s, what do I really want to do with my life and my career? A lot of people have given to me and I can't give directly back to them. I've got to spend my time and effort figuring out how I can continue to kind of carry that torch and help others out. And that's kind of where I'm at in my career, and how I can try to do that through my business.
It sounds like you've had a great career, and if you ever want to play golf, let me know. I'm not far, so we can.
Not far. I'll have to bring you up. Yeah, we'll go play some nice courses right here in Richmond. Kidlock, number one rated course in Virginia. Kidlock, right there. We're just up the street. We'll go out.
I'm down. I'm ready.
And so you mentioned your nieces at West Point. Do you get back?
Yeah.
Often? Like you go.
Well, I keep a commitment to Coach Ward, and really help the Army Wrestling Club with the fundraising for the golf. That's something I take on every year to try to help support and do the best I can. That's important to me now with my niece there. She's on the softball team. I've tried to get up there I've seen her at one game and, try to hit a football game up there. So, I still have a couple of classmates. Actually, the superintendent is my classmate there. So Mark Quander. And recently had a couple guys up there. General Pat Work. He's a classmate of mine. And so, after all my international career, there's not a lot of West Pointers over in China. So, I'm really trying to, spend time, get back into the network. I've actually have a good group of 89 grads that I engage with as well through, just been, activating the network, and they've kind of taken me under their wing in a certain way. But lots of opportunities to get back to West Point, tied to my niece and some of my classmates that are up there that I get a chance to see. Spencer Kluwat up there, he's the econ professor, head of econ up there. So I think he's retiring next year, or maybe it's this year, but another good guy up there. And also the golf coach, I think, is a West Point grad and my classmate. I think Brad is his name.
Nice. Do you keep in contact with many of the wrestlers in your class or on your years?
Let's see here. So I try to keep track of my buddy Sammy, my co-captain Sammy. He's in New York City, I think. I forget what the fort that is down in New York, but he's there. Gosh, my 20-year reunion, I saw quite a few guys, but a lot of them, other than kind of when Coach Ward does the screen, the webinars, I kind of see a couple folks there. So I don't know. There's not that many in Richmond, at least from a wrestler standpoint. I know there's probably a couple up there in Northern Virginia, but I don't get to see them too much. I got a couple guys I just try to interact with every once in a while.
Yeah. Well,
I knew that name sound familiar, and I was looking it up. I think he's the North Atlantic Division Deputy Commander for USACE.
Yeah, that's
I know I talked to him at some point before.
Yeah.
His name.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's another one. Put there on the golf for Sammy. Get him up there.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea to me. Do you know when the golf tournament is this year? Have they?
They had. What is it? They did put it out. I think Todd Messett.
Yeah, it's actually on my birthday, September 24th.
September. Okay, a little earlier than last year, which is probably good. Get there maybe on an off football weekend, but that's something that I've already been started to get engaged on, and got a lot of good auction items and things like that for guys to participate on. So I think he does that all online. So I'll have some special gifts there from the industry to try to get in front of everybody.
Yeah, if there's anything extra that you just don't want to put up on there, you want to throw our way, just let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. I got some tees and things like that. We definitely get you.
I'm teasing. I actually just went on a golf trip this past weekend up to Crystal Springs. We golfed. I forget. Man, I'm blanking on the name of the course, but it was a really nice course. This is bad radio right now.
That's all right. What state?
Any North Jersey. It was
okay.
Ballyowen.
Okay, yeah. There's a lot. We actually have a lot in our network in the New Jersey metropolitan area. So actually this fall we were putting on a kind of an interesting pro tournament, trying to create another kind of golf tour with our company there. But it's a lot of great tracks up through that area, a lot of chance to have a little fun. So glad to be able to try to facilitate anybody who's interested and reach out. You can figure out how to reach out to me, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. Well, before we kind of close things up, we always ask, what who you would like to hear on the show in the future. If you can think, I think you have some prepared, but who would you want to hear on the podcast in the future?
Well, I think I did my name dropping already. I got a couple of my classmates there that I mentioned back in Army Wrestling. Sammy Volkman. So yeah, he's still in. Romy O'Daniel, I think he's out in Colorado. and then Bill Solinger. He was our heavyweight. And then the other seniors that I graduated with, I think Mark Swanson and Justin Van Epps. I think they're Van Epps. I hate to say it, I can't remember his name, but yeah, I think he got his star too. I think he's still in as well. So yeah, my classmates are right in that range of, either kind of being so-called forced out at retirement age or making their star. So if they're still in, a lot of them are doing a heck of a job still.
Yeah. No. Well,
yeah. So those would be the guys. I don't know. Have you had Nick Malden on before?
No, we haven't.
Yeah, I got to get a hold of Nick. He's doing some great things out there, and he was in charge of ODIA. I think he was like master of the sword or something at West Point at some point in time. But now he's back in his hometown of Oklahoma out there, and he comes out to the West Point Golf every year too. So he's another one for figuring out how to transition out of the military. He's recently taken over a franchise for Chick-fil-A. And is I think doing just gangbusters out there from when I talked to him last time I saw him. So,
kind of guy.
Yeah, there are that was, if anything, for the guy you talk about, advice for transitioning, you really need to tap into the West Point network, your West Point network, and anybody who's West Point, because there's a lot to learn there. That was something that I really didn't do, and that I would say is a huge mistake. Not to do that is to, and even if you're already in the civilian world, you need to, engage with your West Point network along the way. It is the way things are going to open up for you throughout, your active military and active civilian life.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a network. I think a lot of people do, but I think it's an evolving network that you stay consistent with.
And don't be shy. I mean, don't be shy to ask, right? You've earned the right to ask. Now, again, will you get something in return? Not always, but you've earned the right to ask. That's, don't hesitate to ask.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show tonight, opening up. I'm sure the listeners, they after every episode where we have somebody that's like older than a 2000 grad, we always have several people reach out, like just thanking us for putting this together, because these are interesting stories that don't get told. And so we want to get more more grads from the 70s, 80s, 90s on. So we appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate you guys doing it. And it was great speaking with you. And, again, can't thank you enough for the effort that you put into this, right? Recognize you're doing it out of, the goodness of your hearts and your own time. And just wanted to say thanks for doing it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Matt. I'll be in touch with you.
Yeah, you know what? I want to get back and take my family down and show them the old dive den. I wonder if they have the dive tower there still. Do they have that?
Yeah, they do.
Hey, they still got that? Okay, I can take them down to the bottom. We put a pipe square together down at the bottom of that.
Maybe we'll set up a tour.
Yeah, give me a hard hat. I'll put me back in the Superlight 17. I'll be just at home.
Sounds good.
All right, guys.
Awesome. I'll see you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the BHAW radio show. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. If there's something you'd like to hear on a future show, reach out to us on any of our social media, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Or you can reach us at email, bhaw.radio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and as always, go Army, be Navy.